Hello everybody. Good morning. Welcome to Flavors of Spain. My name is Emily, chef and coordinator of New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital's Teaching Kitchen. I'm so pleased that you're joining me on this beautiful, sunny, hot August morning to enjoy some flavors of Spain. I certainly wish that I were on the coast of Spain today on the Mediterranean. That would be nice, right? Nice place to take a dip. Many of you may or may not know, but my husband's family, even though they are Italian, they live in Spain outside of Barcelona. And that was the first time I ever tried a paella. And I just fell in love with the dish. I learned to make it, and it's not as hard as you would think. Paella has a really interesting history, so I'll dive into that. But as we begin, if you have any questions or comments, you all know how to use the chat, hopefully by now. If not, Alita, thank you for getting that started. Feel free to put your questions in there. Alita, who's moderating our program today, will bring me your questions. So that way we can avoid muting and muting and all that stuff that can be confusing on Zoom. So we're making paella and we're making gazpacho. I make my gazpacho a little bit differently, maybe not the completely traditional way, but I really like it. So I hope you will too. I'm going to share my special recipe with you. And paella it's an internationally known rice dish at this point. It originated in the fields of a region called Valencia on the eastern coast of Spain. There are many, many versions of paella. Some have chicken, some have pork, some have shellfish. Others have squid, eel, beans, peas, artichokes, peppers. Saffron is the spice that turns the rice into that wonderful golden color. So that's something that you'll see consistently across paella, is that saffron to give it that beautiful golden color. But there are as many versions of paella as there are cooks that make it. So a lot of different kinds, and I'm going to share mine with you today. So the origins of paella are interesting. There's an old story of how Moorish kings' servants created these rice dishes by mixing these leftovers from royal banquets in large pots to take home. Some say that the word paella originates from the Arab word bakia, meaning leftovers. But some linguists believe that the word paella actually comes from the name of the pan that it's made in, the Latin term patella, flat pan on which offerings were made to the gods. So there's some sort of conflicting, origin stories on the paella, but the stories of servants, creating these dishes from the king's leftovers, it's very romantic. We know for certain that it was not until the mid-19th century that sort of what we think of as paella today was born. Modern paella, we'll call it modern paella. That was created in an area around Albufera, which is this big freshwater lagoon near the city of Valencia. So during lunch, the workers in the fields would make this rice dish in a big flat pan over a fire, and they mixed in really whatever they could find. It could be snails, it could be vegetables. So that's kind of how we know at least the modern paella was born. So two kind of rules for paella, well, maybe three, the saffron being one of them. The first is you must cook it in a large, flat, open, round pan. So there are paella pans with two handles. They can be this big, they can be this big. I've seen them this big, but we are going to be using a cast iron skillet today to make ours. So a large, flat, open pan. So that's essential. And the other is the type of rice that we're using. So we are using bomba rice, B-O-M-B-A. It comes in a little bag like this. And this type of rice is really special because it's this round rice from Levante, the eastern coast of Spain. And this is sort of what it looks like. You can see the grains are really short and round, almost like sushi rice. The shape of the rice matters. So if you can't get your hands on bomba rice, you can use like a medium grain rice, but you cannot use a long grain rice for this dish. It won't work. So if the bomba rice is not available, use a medium grain rather long grain. Both bamba or the medium grain rice absorb a lot of liquid, which makes it really suitable for the paella. You can usually order bamba rice online. It's sometimes found in Spanish food retailers. If you've got any of those near you, then you are lucky. But yes, that's kind of the history and the background on paella. So any questions or comments on that before we begin with our dish?
Not yet, Chef Emily.
Okay.
Taking it all in.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, a question did just come in. Can you use
Sure.
arborio rice in place of the bamba rice?
So yeah, because arborio is also that short grain. It's a little bit different. Arborio rice, I think, makes this very creamy. You probably could. I think it might work. I haven't tried it, so I'm not sure, but I think it might work because it's also a short, round kind of rice. Good question. Not sure. Yeah. Thanks. So as with all good things, we begin with the onion. So I'm going to start by cutting off the top, cutting off the bottom. And we're just using half an onion for this dish, half of a red pepper, half of a green pepper to kind of get the sofrito started. Sofrito is like sort of the base of the paella. You want to build in all of that flavor from the bottom up. So this onion's giving me a hard time this morning. It's like, it's 10:30. Why are you trying to peel me? I was just having a nice snooze on the counter. Sorry, onion. All right, taking off the peel. We're just going to use half, like I mentioned, and I'm going to put it flat side down. This is the top, this is the bottom, and you just want to get a small little dice going. So I'm going to cut sort of like creating pages of a book, and then I'm going to cut across this way to do a crosshatch. So tuck your fingers, roll your knife. The onion is pretty cool because it has, you know, as we know, it has all these layers. Then you can tip it over to the flat side and cut it across. And the layers will kind of break apart as you are sauteing them. So get it nice and small. We're going to add some olive oil to our pan. And we're going to get the sofrito started with that onion. We're going to add our red pepper. Oops, I almost forgot my spoon. And green pepper. We're adding some garlic to this, of course. I have some sliced garlic here. I'm going to show you how I did that. So with the garlic, it's a little bit hard to slice it if you try to peel it whole. So let me rephrase. It's a little bit hard to peel it if you try to peel it whole. You can kind of like work your way from the bottom and peel the little pieces off. But what I usually do is I hold it with my fingers, cut it in half. Same thing like the onion, right? Once you cut it in half, it's a lot easier to take the skin off. And we do want to slice the garlic. We don't want to crush, mince, destroy the garlic. The reason for this is that by slicing it, it's going to have a much more kind of gentle garlicky flavor. The more you work garlic, the more you crush it and mince it and all the rest, the more it will impart a very strong garlic taste. So I often tell people, if you're not a fan of garlic, try treating it gently, not crushing it or anything like that. It is so good for us. And then you might find that you do a little bit better with the flavor. Okay, so we're getting that started. I'm starting this sort of on a low heat. I'm going to add my green pepper, which I already did. I'm going to show you how I did it. So I'm going to demonstrate the red pepper. The other half can be saved for another project, maybe a salad or something. You can cut off the top. And I'm going to turn myself so you can see, disconnect the seeds from the outside. So using the tip of your knife, not going all the way through. This part's a little tricky. It's kind of finding that balance. Turning as I go. There we go. Now we're ready. Go in, twist, seeds come out. And then there's always these little like pieces at the bottom there. So I just go in and pull them out with my hands. That kind of white pithy stuff. Some people eat it. It's probably fine to eat. I find it tastes a little bit bitter. So I just take that out. Okay. And get our green pepper mixed in. And we're gonna wanna chop this pretty small. So you can all see, there we go. Maybe this is a little bit better. Okay, so I'm gonna start cutting it in half. And then I use the curvature of the pepper to kind of move the knife along. Each slice that I'm making here is about 1/4 of an inch. Pretty small little slices. And then I'm gonna go across the other way to cut it into tiny little dice. Has anyone ever made paella before? Anyone in the audience? You want to share your experience in your own paella and what you made and how you made it and what you put in it? I would be really curious to hear from all of you. So I'm going across, kind of stacking our little, I always call this a little bundle of firewood. And going across to get this super small, kind of scrape it together. You can also put your hand on top to get a mince, to get it even smaller. So interestingly, my husband is not a fan of red pepper or green pepper. He doesn't like it. He says he doesn't digest it well. He finds that he doesn't like the taste. But whenever I make paella, suddenly all of those complaints seem to disappear. So I don't know. Maybe it's just maybe because it's cooked, cut so small, and it kind of blends in, and you create that really kind of nice sofrito base. Maybe that's why it seems to be okay for him. But yeah, if you find you don't like red or green peppers, certainly you can, use different veggies. I mean, you can play around with different stuff, but this is really the base of your paella is the sofrito. You want to make sure everything, we've got the onions, the garlic, the green pepper, the red pepper, and then our next step is going to be to add the squid. So squid is interesting because it either cooks well if you cook it for a long time, or if you cook it for a really short amount of time, like I'm talking a minute or 2 minutes. Anything in the between, it tends to be kind of rubbery and tough. So, so in our case, we're cooking it for a long stretch. I have our squid here. This is what it looks like. And I just use scissors to cut it into small pieces. I find this is the easiest way to kind of work with it. So every piece, should be, again, about a 1/2 inch wide. So I did the rest of these already. And then same thing, with the tentacles, you can just cut them up a little bit to get them a little bit smaller. I am not the tentacle person. I think everyone is either like body or tentacles. There's a few people out there that like both. I'm a squid body person, not a tentacle person, but my husband is a tentacle person. So I guess we complement each other, right? We don't have to fight over. It's kind of like bagels. There's always a top bagel, people who like the top half of the bagel and people who prefer the bottom half of the bagel. All right, so we've got our sofrito. Now we're gonna kind of move this off to the side. So you can see I'm making a lot of room in the pan here. And I just wanna make sure that I am doing this correctly. It's been a while, move to the side. Okay, we're gonna cook this squid for a few minutes. So in it goes. And then we're gonna add our grated tomato, paprika, and saffron. Now you can use your, just pinch your saffron and throw it in, or you can soak it in a little bit of water. I like to do it that way because it just kind of like, it hydrates it, it kind of opens it up. But either one is fine. So the squid is getting most of the pan surface here. Everything else is pushed off to the side. I really love this because it really is like a one pot wonder, right? Everything just gets tossed together. So I'm gonna start grating the tomato, and then we have our paprika and our saffron, and we're gonna add that in. So this is where it gets a little juicy and messy. So as you can see, I've got this kind of like big bin this was my idea. I don't know if this is gonna work well, but I'm gonna start by taking out the top of the tomato. Now this is a nice tomato from the garden. And I go in at an angle to pull that core out. I'm going to cut this in half, so it's a little bit smaller, quarters, easier to work with, right? And then we're going to start grating it on the box grater, on the largest holes of the box grater. Any questions while I do this?
Yes, there's a question from Judy. Where did you get the bomba rice?
Judy, I actually went to Spain. I actually
Long
went
trip.
to Spain and I brought it back. Worth the trip, but you can find it online. If you look up, I think Alida, if you look up bomba rice, and you could probably find a good link to put in the chat. It's very easy to find it online. I know Amazon sells it. I don't, love to buy things on Amazon, but once in a while, I try to, support local, but not everybody carries bomba rice. So you got to make some exceptions. So I'm grating this tomato. Now it says 3 large tomatoes. This was a particularly large tomato. So I don't think I'll need 3 of them. But, you want about 3 cups of tomato pulp stuff. So I'm kind of just pushing this down. I'm throwing the skins in here too. The skins don't really grate as easily, but I'm going to throw them in because as we learned from paella, this is kind of like it all goes in. This is a green zebra tomato. I just thought it was really beautiful. So we're going to add that in for more tomato flavor. And yeah, you can play around with different kinds of tomatoes for this. It's definitely tomato season. So get to your farmer's market, get your beautiful August tomatoes. End of August is just the best time to get these. There's nothing quite like a fresh tomato. All right, so we're ready for the next step. We're gonna add, our squid has cooked for a few minutes. We're gonna kind of push that to the side. And now we're gonna add our tomato. Woo. So I'm gonna bring the heat up at this point because I added a lot of liquid, which is gonna bring the temperature down. Alida, did you find a place for bomba rice? How did it go?
So actually, some of your participants wrote in that there is an online store called latienda.com.
Oh, awesome.
And also the Spanish Table is another website.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes, I forgot about that one.
So that's it for now. But Donata did say that her friend makes a sofrito in a blender so the little pieces disappear. That's and you had asked a question about the different kinds of paella. So Valerie says she uses chicken, squid, shrimp, roasted peppers, peas, and mussels.
I love it. Yeah. So you can really put anything in here. It's really cool.
So I make a vegan paella. I wrote it in. So I use lots of veggies and top off with caramelized oyster, trumpet, or portobello mushrooms on the top. So that feels like the meat.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
And that's it for now.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds really good. Very inspiring, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Let's not forget, we're going to add our paprika. Paprika is red pepper that's been dried. We're going to add our saffron. And we're going to let this kind of turn into more of like a paste, right? So it's pretty loose right now. And I'm just going to stir this all together and let it kind of bubble, right? We want it to get a little bit thicker. So mixing all of that good flavor in here. It's hard to imagine I'm going to add more things to the skillet because it's already so full. Okay, so we've heated the pan. We got the garlic, the onion, the peppers. We caramelized them a little bit, moved it to the side, added the squid, added our grated tomato, saffron, and paprika. And we're going to cook this into, a little bit more of a paste. So the heat is pretty high because I want to kind of evaporate some of that liquid out. We're going to push that to the side in a moment. Then we're going to add the bomba rice and we're going to mix it with the sofrito. We're going to add hot stock. So I have my nice, my stock heating up back here. You can use a fish broth, is sort of ideal for this seafood-based one. I did not find a fish broth, so we're using vegetable stock. So this is a low sodium vegetable stock. I like to start off with low sodium and taste as you go at home. I don't taste as I go here because then my mouth would be full of food and it would be hard to talk to you all. But adding a little bit of salt as you go, because a lot of seafood is already inherently salty. The shrimp, the mussels, the squid, they're coming from salty environments. So on their own, they may impart a salty flavor. So why are we focusing on fish and seafood? As always, fish and seafood have lots of lean protein, great source of vitamin D, which is hard to find in our food. The vitamin D that we mostly get is through sunlight, but we know that sunlight can be dangerous for us if we have too much skin exposure. So you just want to think about what are some of the dietary sources of vitamin D that you can include as well. Almost everyone is deficient in vitamin D. You could probably find that out easily by working with your primary care, doing a blood test and seeing what your vitamin D levels are. It usually is very low in the winter because we're not spending time outside. So this time of year, your vitamin D is probably pretty high. The liver does store the vitamin D for about 3 months. So, October, November, December, and then we start to kind of get depleted in vitamin D. And I don't think it's any surprise that a lot of people struggle with seasonal affect disorder, SAD, which is often when people experience symptoms of depression and just a little bit more of a struggle in January, because also vitamin D levels are low, and vitamin D has some really interesting studies connecting it to mental health and specifically depression. So it's interesting to kind of dig into that, try to learn a little bit about it, and see for yourself. In terms of vitamin D supplements, you can definitely talk to your doctor and see if that's a good option for you. You may only need to take it in the winter months. And as we know, vitamin D is so important for the absorption of calcium. So those two work together. So when we're not getting enough vitamin D, we don't really absorb the calcium that we need. And that's when we can start to experience issues with our bone health. So if that hasn't convinced you to once in a while find foods that include some vitamin D, including fish and seafood, another reason is, of course, for the omega-3 fatty acids. So that's highest in cold water fish, things like salmon, mackerel, herring, sardines, which I'm really on a kick of sardines. I'm trying to include more of those, and bluefish. So omega-3 is really important for heart health. It's also important for bringing down inflammation in the body. Shellfish have been eaten all over the world for centuries. They're really, really good for you. They may help to boost immunity. They may help to aid in weight loss because of that great protein content, and they promote that brain and heart health, as I mentioned. They're also particularly rich in minerals, things like iron, zinc, magnesium, and they also contain B vitamins, specifically vitamin B12. So any kind of shellfish refers to animals that dwell in water. They have a shell or a shell-like exterior. They can usually be divided into two groups, the crustaceans and the mollusks. So the crustaceans are things like your shrimp and your crayfish and your crab and your lobster, while the clams, scallops, oysters, and mussels are the mollusks. So it's great to try to include both if you can. So this is starting to thicken up a little bit. Some become a little bit more concentrated. It smells incredible. So I think we're ready for our next step here, which is to add the rice. So here's our rice. I'm going to kind of push some of this to the side, although it's going to be hard because it's still a little liquidy. I'm going to push the solids off to the side. We're going to add the rice. I'm using 1 3/4 cups of rice. And I'm just going to start to, slowly mix this in little by little, giving it exposure to some of the heat on the bottom of the pan, just to kind of help the rice open up its pores, accepting all of that good juice that's coming in. I don't know if you all can see what this looks like. Let me bring this over to you for just a second. So you can see the rice is kind of on one half, and then the mixture of veggies and stuff is on the other. Boy, that's heavy. Okay. And I still have this over like a medium-high heat, just kind of getting that rice to start soaking up the sofrito. And now I'm going to do a big sweep all the way around and mix it all together. So I kind of like to start by activating the rice a little bit with some direct exposure to the pan and then mixing it together. I'm sure some people just mix it all together and don't worry about that step, but I don't know, superstition. That's how I learned it. That's how I do it, right? So mixing that really nicely. Oh my gosh, it's really a beautiful sight to behold, a paella. Okay, we have our rice in there. We're gonna start to add our stock. So have that back here. It's nice and hot. And you're gonna wanna add 4 to 5 cups. I usually start with 4 and then see how, if it needs a little bit more. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's see how we do with that. Okay. So you do want the stock to be hot when you add it. That's an important step. It should, have come to a simmer. That way it's going to not bring the whole temperature of your pan down. So it's a good trick to kind of have that just low heat in the background while you're getting everything else together. Questions or comments? Anybody hungry for some paella?
Could you use a Dutch oven?
No. So unless you have a really big, wide, flat Dutch oven, but usually Dutch ovens have high sides, and you want something where all the steam can kind of escape as you're cooking it. So I'm gonna say no to that one. I mean, you could try. Let me know how it comes out. I'd be curious. But a wide, flat pan, that's the key, or so I've been told. Any other questions or?
So yeah, there was a question about, Kathy said that she came in a little late, but she wants to know how you made the fish stock. But I guess you missed that you use veggies.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kathy, good question. So the secret to making fish stock is to use vegetable broth. I didn't have any fish stock, so I just used veggie stock today. And Kathy, since you came in late, it's also worth mentioning again that paella is kind of what you make when you have lots of odds and ends. It's kind of everything thrown together in the pan. So you don't have fish stock, you can use vegetable stock or chicken broth, or even water would be fine. It wouldn't be as flavorful, but that would be fine too. If you can find a good fish stock or broth, I think maybe Kohl's Market sells it. I'm not too sure, but if you guys, anyone has resources on where to find a good fish broth or stock, feel free to add it into the chat for Kathy and myself, since I didn't have the time to do much of a search for it. But I like using vegetable stock too, so either one is good.
Yeah. So Chef Emily Ann says she had to leave because she got called into a meeting, but she made a good point that she was looking forward to making the paella, but to look at the replay of the class. Which is great because sometimes you miss something, or you came in late, or you had to leave early.
Yeah, definitely.
So good plug.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Yeah, definitely. You can find our classes on our website after the fact. So if you had to get pulled away, of course, it's really great if you can attend live, because then you get to ask your questions and stuff. And it's also great for us to have people here live, because that also helps me to show that this is, an important program that people are attending live. So that's always useful. But if you do miss it for whatever reason, yeah, always it's online. Alita, do you have that website of where our virtual classes are online?
I can find it. But just to know, Valerie said that she uses clam juice.
Oh, nice, Valerie. Oh, you know what? I did buy clam juice for this. I totally forgot. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I did have, I think I did have a bottle of clam juice somewhere that I brought in, or you know what? I can't find it. It's got to be somewhere, right? Go ahead.
And then it says, Kathy said that you can make fish stock could you make fish stock using shrimp shells?
So that's an interesting idea, Kathy. I think you could make a flavored broth that tastes somewhat like fish from the shells, but yeah, I have not tried that, so I'm not too sure. Gosh, this is giving me a hard time. You probably could. It just, I'm just not too sure what it would come out to be like. Clam juice, ready to use. Thank you, Valerie, for reminding me. Get this open. Any other questions or comments?
I'm looking. No, but Millie Pilson did add the website address on the thing.
Oh,
so
thank you, Millie.
So Donata wants to know, if you don't have a cast iron pan, could you use non-stick pan like ceramic?
Ooh, I think, you know, as long as it's a large, flat, wide pan, I don't think the paella police is going to come after you. But I don't know how the temperature would, you know, one of the reasons I really like to use the cast iron is because it retains and distributes heat really evenly. So that's a big question mark. I'm sure that, I think it might work. I think it could work. Just make it, you know, the biggest, widest pan you have. This is a 12-inch skillet. So if it's big and wide, you might be okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that? This is a very co-creative class. I love it. If anyone has ever made paella in their, you know, in a different kind of skillet or pan that's not a paella pan or a cast iron, I'd be really curious to hear what the results are. Okay, so I'm letting this simmer. And we're gonna go and start on our gazpacho. So this is a little bit easier than paella because everything goes into the blender. I do this in a few steps. I start by blending everything except for the olive oil, blend it all together. Then we're gonna push it through the strainer to kind of get out all the solids. Some people like it with all the, you know, solid chunky bits. That's fine if you wanna do that. Then I put it back in the blender, blend it, and while it's blending, I drizzle in the olive oil. This helps to kind of emulsify the whole mixture. It makes it like fluffy. Who knew soup could be fluffy, right? But I do think it has like a really cool kind of fluffy texture. So this recipe calls for, let's see, half of a cucumber peeled and seeded. So I have these little, tiny little cucumbers. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel them. But I'm not going to seed them because their seeds are so small and inoffensive that I don't really mind them in here. I usually do take the seeds out of my cucumbers because they're very watery. They don't add a lot of flavor in my opinion, and I find that they tend to repeat on folks. So I like to take the seeds out. But because these are such small little cucumbers, you can just peel them and leave the seeds in. So I'm just taking the peel off. And we'll cut off the tops and the bottoms. All right. So half of a cucumber peeled and seeded roughly translates to about a cup of cucumber. So if you want to make a note about that, feel free to do so. I'm just occasionally moving this around because the rice tends to sink to the bottom, right? And the liquid tends to float to the top. So just once in a while, kind of redistributing that. Letting it simmer. Okay, we're ready for our red onion. Oh, I forgot. This is another step I do. So I lied. This is like maybe a three-step process. I'm just going to slice this red onion into thin slices, and I'm going to let it soak in some water. So the reason that I'm doing this is I find red onion to be tough. I find it to be very strong taste, and it kind of overpowers everything. But I like that, you know, it can be used in a way that's a little more gentle and mild. So how am I doing this? I'm gonna let it soak. I'm kind of breaking the pieces apart. I'm gonna let it soak in some water just for, you know, 5 minutes or so, and that'll help to kind of disinhibit that harshness. I often will do this with vinegar, but because we're adding vinegar to this already, I don't want there to be too much of a strong vinegar flavor. So I'm just doing this with water. Just kind of disinhibiting that intensity. Okay, let's let that sit to the side. We are adding more garlic because what would be a Flavors of Spain class without a ton of garlic? It's really interesting how, you know, these Mediterranean style diets are loaded with garlic, and they seem to be some of the healthiest diets around. So I don't want to say that it's just garlic, because it's definitely not. There's so much more than that. But I think garlic's pretty important. And, you know, there are some very interesting studies around garlic and the immune system, and it also just tastes great. So let's add that in. Chop, rough chop, and it goes. So here's, I'm going to bring this over here so you can all see a little bit better. Of course, we need to add our tomatoes. So I have some small little cherry ones. I like to cut these in half just to give the blender a little bit of an easier time. You can use cherry tomatoes, or you can use big tomatoes. The most important thing is that it's a delicious tomato. I don't care what variety you use, as long as it's peak ripe delicious. So we got another big beauty from our garden. Look at that. I mean, it looks like the sun. It's just so pretty. And same thing here. I'm going to use my knife. I'm going in at an angle to pull out the core. Okay, so that comes out. There's a little bit of a, how do I say this nicely? A pre-digested part, AKA a bug started to eat this tomato, but that's okay. I'm just going to cut that part off. The rest of it is completely beautiful and perfect. That bug was doing important work. You know, it was sampling the tomato, just, you know, making sure that it was going to be good for me and our gazpacho. You know, really important to work with your bug allies. Okay. Oh, this is starting to stick a little on the bottom, so I need to move it around once in a while. I got lazy. So you might be noticing, I don't know how much you can see back there, but you might be noticing this is starting to really absorb a lot of that liquid. So you can use, as Valerie suggested, you've got your clam juice. I think the ingredients in clam juice is just clam broth. Ah, there's sea salt. There you go, sea salt in your clam broth. So just keep that in mind. You may not need to add salt because there's salt in the broth. Add a little bit more of that. Keep it going. This is almost ready. It's really starting to absorb, pretty much absorb all of that flavor well. So before I go to gazpacho, I'm going to add the shrimp, because the shrimp needs to cook for about 5 minutes, and the mussels. Mussels need to go in there too. Okay, about a pound of mussels and a pound of shrimp. Let's stir that all together. And that's going to go for about 5 to 8 minutes, just until your shrimp gets nice and bright pink. You don't want any gray shrimp, right? A gray shrimp will spoil your paella party for sure. So mix that all together. It's really beautiful. Gosh, this is such a wonderful dish. You know, bring this to the table and chow down with a bunch of friends. You know, it's a nice kind of big dish that you can enjoy all together. Okay, so we're adding our, or by yourself, which is often the case for me too, just enjoy it all on your own. So we've got the cucumber in there, we've got the garlic, we've got the tomatoes. We're ready for our secret ingredient. I don't know if you're ready for this, but I have some cherries. So I use about a cup of frozen cherries that have been defrosted. And I know this is a weird one, but this is just so good. It's definitely unusual, and this is not traditional. I feel like the entire Spanish countryside just gasped, but just give it a try because I really like it. We're going to add a little sherry vinegar. We're going to add a little bit of salt, about 4 tablespoons on that sherry vinegar. We're going to blend this down. Oh, I almost forgot. We're adding some red pepper, about half of a red bell pepper. So there you go for your paella dish. The other half goes in there. And let's blend it down. Right. Might be a little hard to get going at first, but once the tomatoes kind of get in there, we're going to add the onion too. Just wanted to give it a little more time in the water. There we go. Okay, let's add the onion. So you don't want to add the water, right? You just want to scoop up the onion and put that in. Okay. Questions or comments? How is everyone doing?
Yeah, there was a question about the rice. When you stir the rice,
You
do
just
you
got
not,
really quiet, Alita. Is that just me?
do you hear me now?
I hear you, but you're just kind of quiet.
Oh, let me up this volume here then.
It's okay, as
All
long as
right.
everyone else can hear you.
Yeah. All right. So they said that it was okay. So
But
Sue wants to know, don't you want the rice to form the succorat, you know, the brown crusty layer in the bottom?
no, so Sue, there are different kinds of paella. Some of them have that brown crusty layer and some of them don't. So if you want to do it that way with the brown crusty bottom, that's not the way that I learned to do it, but it's definitely something that you can make that way. This is how I learned to make it. So this is how I do it in my home. But if you wanted to make the brown crusty layer, you just wouldn't stir it or move it around as much. You could just let it sit and crust up to you.
And Donata said that she never heard of sherry vinegar. She wants to know, is it similar to balsamic vinegar?
Yeah, so Donata, thanks for asking. So this is sherry vinegar, Vinagre de Jerez. It's from the Jerez region in Spain. So you can see here on the side, it says protected designation of origin. That certifies that our sherry vinegar is made from grapes grown within the Jerez sherry something something. Oh my gosh, a lot of Spanish can't say those words. Region. So this is what it is. It's just made from a specific kind of grape, just like balsamic is made from a specific kind of grape. And it has a different flavor from balsamic. It's a little bit like, it's more like a red wine vinegar, I think, than a balsamic vinegar. Yeah. Any other questions? And then I'm going to blend.
Just that, could this dish be kept on warm or must it be served right away?
It's best to serve this right away and warm if you can. But if you need to heat it up and have it the next day, that's fine too. It's good as leftovers.
That's it. You can blend away.
Okay, here we go. So you want to get it really blended. And now we're going to strain. The cherries make it, give it an interesting kind of color. So you might not be able to go all at once, but it's good to have a spatula to kind of move this down little by little, right? So you can see I'm just straining out the solids. Again, if you don't want to, you don't have to, but I find that it does improve the soup a lot. It gets like really velvety and smooth. So it's an extra step, but try it out, see what you think. So you can kind of strain, pour a little bit more. I'm going to show you all the stuff that's at the bottom of the strainer because you will be surprised. You think, oh, it already looks so like smooth and fluffy. Well, there's a lot of like little bits and pieces in here. So just keep moving it down. Move this aside so you can see. And gazpacho is great. You can keep it in your fridge for 2 to 3 days and kind of just drink it down and cool down with a nice chilled soup. Oh my gosh, that smells so good. So the shrimp is pink and the mussels are cooked. They're open, so we're done. I'm gonna turn that off while we finish this up. One last little bit. Okay, I'm gonna give this blender a rinse because there are, you can see there's like little bits and pieces on the side. So I just want that super velvety, smooth gazpacho. And then we're done. That's it. You've got your gazpacho. Gazpacho is pretty quick. I think it's a great way to use up the best that summer has to offer between the peppers, the tomatoes, and the cucumbers, right? Let me show you this. Give it a good tap because there's going to be some that wants to stay on the bottom there. You can use the spatula to encourage that off. So this is all the solid stuff, right? That got stuck there. And then we'll do a final blend, do a quick rinse, and you're on your way to delicious, velvety, gorgeous gazpacho. Some people are just not, don't feel inspired to do the straining step. It is an extra step, but it's definitely worth doing. All right, we're gonna start that on low. And as it's going in the blender, add that olive oil. This is gonna lighten the color a little bit, and it's gonna emulsify the whole soup and blend in, kind of coating every little molecule with a luscious, monounsaturated, super healthy, vitamin E rich fat, which is olive oil. Okay. So now you can see the texture. It really changes a lot once you add the olive oil. Super fluffy and smooth. You're ready to enjoy it. You can have it in a bowl or put it in a glass and drink it as an appetizer. And then I know our time is up. I'm just going to serve up the paella so you can have a good look at it. Kind of get under there. And you want to make sure, you know, as you're serving your paella, you get a little bit of, you know, a little bit of every seafood on there. Okay. So you've got the shrimp, you've got the squid, you've got the mussels, and this recipe also calls for crawfish, another thing that's a little bit difficult to find. So if you wanted to use the crawfish, you would add it with the shrimp. It's actually really pretty with the crawfish because you can kind of lay them in a nice pattern on the top, and they kind of, yeah, they look really beautiful. So I want to read, I've been really enjoying this book. It's called Home Cooking by Laurie Colwin, a writer in the kitchen. And she writes about red peppers. And I just thought I wanted to share this with you all because we're using red peppers today in both of our dishes. And it's really beautiful writing. So a raw red pepper is a nice enough vegetable, crunchy and slightly sweet. But roasted or sauteed in olive oil, the red pepper takes on depth. It becomes soft and intense with a smooth, smoky aftertaste. I've been addicted to paprika, red pepper in its powdered form, all of my life and would not dream of cooking without it. I've always believed that if you listen to your food cravings, and I do not mean your constant desire for chocolate brownies, they will tell you what you need. If you long for bananas, it may be potassium you need. I myself once experienced a craving for red peppers so intense that I bought a large bag of them and ate them all as I walked home. Peppers contain large quantities of vitamin A and lesser amounts of vitamin C, as well as phosphorus and iron. But what the heck? As a doctor friend of mine once said, it is silly to do anything for reasons of health. My body may have been crying out for vitamins, but my spirit wanted red peppers. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. It's really beautiful food writing. If anybody is curious to read it, it's called Home Cooking by Laurie Colwin, and it is a feast just to read it. So thank you everybody for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this Flavors of Spain class, and I hope to see you in September. Our September calendar should be coming out in the next few weeks. I am away for the next 2 weeks, not going to Spain, but I will be back in September. September 14th is our first class back with Dr. Agarwal. So please join us for that. I can send you a link to sign up for that class if you'd like in the feedback survey email that I usually send out. I'll send a link for Dr. Agarwal's program since the calendar is not quite out yet, but it's coming soon. Thank you, muchas gracias, Alida. And hope to see you all again. Final questions or comments? Everybody's okay?
Yeah, there was just a question about what else could you use the bomba rice with? What other recipes?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. Let me include some ideas in the email that I sent you all with the feedback survey because our time is up. So thanks everyone. Take care. See you soon.